Welcome to Surface Knowledge, the only podcast that provides you with useless information for a useful reason. Never again be stuck without an interesting tidbit or fun fact in any social situation. Here's your host, Max Kurton.
Well, hello everybody. Welcome to episode 2 of the Surface Knowledge podcast. Really hope you enjoyed that first episode on hoaxes, or, if you're a bit of a maverick and you've jumped straight into the second episode, well done, the quality is normally better. But please do go back and check out the pilot to learn about two-legged beavers on the moon and kind of the whole purpose of this podcast. Now, I'm going to read, obviously, the quick disclaimer, which I'm going to do at the start of every episode, so if you don't want to hear it again, press the skip 15-second button. But not everything you hear is always 100% factual. I'm going to do my absolute best to research thoroughly, but I might make some small mistakes. Please don't kill me. And always do your own research. Plus, if you do happen to be an expert on the matter, feel free to reach out. Always happy to make corrections, and please keep in mind that this is surface knowledge, meaning that we're not going to cover every single detail of a set topic, and things might be missed. There are hundreds of deep dive podcasts out there. Please go check them out, obviously after you finish listening to mine. Now, welcome to episode 2, a surface knowledge of pro wrestling, a personal favorite subject matter of mine, and was very hard to do a complete surface knowledge understanding of the history of pro wrestling. So, if you're a wrestling newbie, then this episode is going to give you everything you need to breeze through a good old wrestling conversation with even the most diehard fan. So, there is a lot to cover here, so I'm just going to dive straight into this one. So let's talk about professional wrestling as it kind of stands today, what it is in the most modern sense of the term. The quickest distinction that I really want to make for you is understanding the difference between amateur wrestling and pro wrestling. Now, amateur wrestling is a variant of wrestling practices at the Olympic, collegiate, and a bunch of other levels. There are two international styles, there's freestyle and Greco-Roman, and amateur wrestling is a 100% legit sport where you win by pins and technical superiority from actually out-wrestling your opponent. On the other side of the aisle, what we have that we're talking about today is pro wrestling, which is already confusing because we're talking about amateur and pro, but just stick with me. Let's talk about the obvious elephant in the room. You're going to hear the term fake being used a lot when it comes to pro wrestling. Every time you say you like wrestling, that's fake, right? I don't like the word fake. Fake implies it's not genuine, it's a forgery, it's not real, nothing's real. Wrestling is very real in many aspects, but what it is it's predetermined sports entertainment. It's not very sexy when you put it like that, but that's what it is. This means that the outcomes are scripted, there are heavy emphasis on entertainment and storytelling over genuine competition. So, to start off the first half of this episode, we're going to learn 4 important wrestling terms. The first of these 4 important wrestling terms that you need to know is the word kayfabe. Kayfabe means that even though the staged nature of matches is an open secret among wrestlers, fans, referees, commentators, they still maintain the pretense that the performances are actual competitions. But why would anyone watch that, I hear you cry, when it's predetermined and you know who's going to win? I'm going to say this really slow for the people in the back. We do not know, as viewers and fans, how a match, a show, a pay-per-view, any kind of long-term storytelling is going to go. The best way to view wrestling is it's the same way as watching any of your favorite shows on TV. You tune in week after week. You want to see how these characters evolve and the story progresses. You can take an educated guess maybe into who the killer is in your favorite crime show. But much like wrestling, you don't know what's happening until the bell is rung and the winner's revealed. It's a really weird metaphor I'm going for here, but you get what I'm going for here. The second of the 4 important wrestling terms that you're going to need to know behind the word kayfabe is the word gimmick. Now, the word gimmick refers to a wrestler's in-ring persona, their character, how they behave, their attitude, or any distinguishing traits that they might have when performing. Wrestling also involves things like costumes, masks, makeup, and catchphrases. These gimmicks evolve and change as the wrestler moves throughout their career. One great example of this is the lovable hardcore legend Mick Foley, who has had multiple characters including Cactus Jack, Dude Love, Mankind, and these are known as the 3 faces of Foley. And another side fun fact for you, all 3 characters appeared in the 1998 Royal Rumble as different entrants on the same night, and we all just kind of went along with it because it was funny and entertaining. Now, most of wrestling for decades and even centuries, it's been going for a long time now, has been built upon matches and storylines between good guys and bad guys. Now I'm going to hit you with important wrestling terms number 3 and number 4 in one go. We don't say good guys. We use our third important wrestling word, which is faces, meaning babyface, which means good guy. And they will always usually be up against the fourth most important word. Here it comes. Heel, which means bad guy. Bad guy, sorry. Faces versus heels is a tale as old as time. The job of the heel is to get that crowd to hate them, whether that's through insulting words directed at the crowd, cheating in the match, using more violent, aggressive moves, anything that would be deemed unacceptable in normal competition. Whereas your faces, they need to be cheered by the fans as they are portrayed as our heroes. So they stick to the rules, they bring the crowd on their side, they overcome these dastardly heels. And obviously, there's going to be nuances to all of this as wrestling has been around for hundreds of years, but the basic you're going to find, in some respect, is good versus bad. So, a quick terminology review that you can whip out in a conversation. Kayfabe, common agreement to pretend that pro wrestling is legit. Great. Gimmick, a wrestler's character. Face, a good guy. Heel, a bad guy. Great. Moving on. So pro wrestling is a worldwide spectacle. Each company is called a promotion. Promotions vary quite considerably in size, scope, creativity. The largest and most influential promotions you're going to find are going to be in the US, Mexico, Japan, Europe. And major promotions, they're full-on businesses. We're talking TV deals, contracts, pay-per-views, sponsorships, and that's where you're going to find your most experienced wrestlers. In the US, you currently have promotions such as WWE, formerly known as WWF, if you've been out of the loop for a while. This was founded back in 1953 and is probably the most well-known wrestling promotion in the world today. AEW is the second biggest, but not near WWE's size, and has only existed since 2019, but is quite often viewed as the alternative. It's the Pepsi to WWE's Coca-Cola, if you will. And TNA has been around for 20 plus years, and despite numerous financial and rating woes, I refer to it as the cockroach of pro wrestling, as it just will not die and somehow keeps coming back stronger and stronger. It's amazing to see. In Mexico, you've got CMLL and AAA. In Japan, you have New Japan Pro Wrestling, Stardom, and Dragon Gate. And arguably in Europe, I'd say WXW, Rev Pro, and Progress are going to be your biggest promotions there. Now, these are just some of the major promotions. There are also things called independent promotions, commonly referred to as the indies. These are going to be smaller than your big TV deal promotions because they don't typically have TV deals. They are independently run and owned, and this is where a lot of newer talent are going to gain experience against other younger wrestlers or people who've been doing it a while trying to break into the more mainstream wrestling. You will also see veteran wrestlers who have been on major promotions in the past appear as special attractions, and this helps the young guys and the up-and-coming guys and girls get their experience. So you'll start to see that the scope of pro wrestling is huge. As of right now, worldwide, there are 2,183 active wrestling promotions in the world, which is a crazy statistic, and you probably have one in your town or city, and you don't even realize it. And if you do, if you can hunt them out, I highly recommend you go catch a show with some friends or family, because seeing live wrestling in person is like nothing you've seen before. Now, history time. Pro wrestling as we know it today can roughly be traced back to the 1800s, where wrestlers were carnival attractions. They had names like Edward the Steel Eater, and they would showcase their feats of strength, and they would have onlookers pay for a chance to knock the wrestlers down. And promoters quickly realized that they could make a lot of money out of this by using audience plants and choreographed matches to make fighters look weaker, which would hustle fans into believing that they had a chance of winning. Another fun wrestling term that I can hit you with is that fans are sometimes referred to as marks, and this has quite a derogatory term nowadays. It means they are easily suckered in and they believe wrestling a bit too much. This term originated from rigged carnival games, where the game operators would find someone who could easily be tricked or fooled, and they would be marked by chalk, usually giving them a pat on the back or the shoulder. And then the other game operators could look at these chalk marks and entice the individual to play their rigged game. Early 1900s was the kind of first boom of professional wrestling, where the stars of wrestling were kind of well-respected celebrities and well-known. The biggest names of this time were Martin Farmer Burns and Paul Pons the Colossus, George Hackenschmidt and Frank Gotch. And Gotch actually became the first world champion in 1908 and eventually retired undefeated in 1913. Unfortunately, this left pro wrestling without a true champion. So when we get to the late 1910s, there was a lot of exposés in the press about the actual integrity of wrestling, because up until this point, people thought it was a legit sport and something they could watch similar to kind of boxing. But these exposés alienated a lot of fans. But wrestling, as an industry, found a way to survive, and it doubled down on the sports entertainment aspect. So there were three wrestlers named Ed the Strangler Lewis, Billy Sandow, and Toots Mondt, one of my favorite names in history. And what they did is they joined forces to form their own promotion in the 1920s, and they modified their in-ring product to attract fans. Now, the three of them were referred to as the Gold Dust Trio due to the financial success that they were having in this new market. And this kind of marks the beginning of professional wrestling as a entertainment industry, separate from competitive wrestling at the time, and it kind of gave a revival of public interest in wrestling, in the interwar period. So for the next almost 30 years until about 1948, there was a bunch of people that were claiming to be world champion after the retirement of Gotch back in 1912. And all of these different promotions were popping up, and they had their champions, as this was, a big ticket item of how you bring people into events. So this is the era where the true pro wrestling company was born. Promoters would run events in various areas and start taking control of the business and controlling their own branded world champions. Now, a big problem that people faced at the time, in these early days of organized wrestling, if you will, was what was called the double cross, where a wrestler would agree to lose, but then he actually fought to win legitimately. And some promoters had to kind of maintain the illusion of legitimacy, so they would still recognize the double crosser as a champion. However, such wrestlers did risk being blacklisted or even sued, and the most famous case of this was a guy by the name of Dick Schickat in 1936. Schickat went off script in a match against a guy called Dano O'Mahony. I wonder where he was from, legitimately injuring him to win the National Wrestling Association World Heavyweight Championship. He then attempted to sell the title to different promoters, leading to retaliation from his former management. This resulted in his suspension across multiple states and exposed the industry's behind-the-scenes dealings in court, and once again with damaging wrestling's credibility and popularity. This kind of led to wrestling territories becoming more clear-cut in the late 1940s. The National Wrestling Alliance, or the NWA, was formed as a coalition of promoters who shared a world champion, but they each controlled their own territories, and there was this kind of mutual understanding agreement that the champion would travel between all of these promotions. In response, and we'll get to this in a sec, AWA, American Wrestling Association, emerged in the 1950s as a rival, and in 1963 the WWF, now WE, partially split from the NWA to operate independently. Wrestling also became an international sensation, with Mexico embracing lucha libre in the 1940s, led by the cultural icon El Santo, and Japan developing its own scene in the 1950s, which was spearheaded by Rikidozan, both of whom became massive stars in their country. The rise of television really helped revitalize wrestling after a very strong decline during World War II. A wrestler by the name of Gorgeous George became the first major TV-era wrestling star who pioneered the entertainment-driven gimmicks that define modern wrestling that we kind of know today. So Gorgeous George's entrance into the arena was accompanied by a theme song played over the arena's loudspeakers, which had never been done before, this being Pomp and Circumstance. He also wore a costume, a robe and a hairnet, which he then removed after getting in the ring, and he always had this pre-match ritual where his butler would spray the ring with perfume. Gorgeous George was the industry's first true cowardly villain, and he would cheat at every opportunity, which always enraged the crowd. His credo was, win if you can, lose if you must, but always cheat. After Orville Brown, the first NWA World Heavyweight Champion, suffered a career-ending accident in 1949, the title was awarded to Lou Thesz, who unified multiple championships and became the undisputed world champion in 1952, and is regarded as one of the most influential wrestlers of all time. The NWA's dominance also led to tensions, as I mentioned earlier, as some promoters accused it of being a monopoly on the industry. So in 1960, Vern Gagne broke away and he formed the AWA, the American Wrestling Association, which became a major competitor. At the same time, the Capital Wrestling Corporation, CWC, was founded in 1953 by Jess McMahon and Toots Mondt. Hello to my favorite name again. and this controlled the Northeast and gained influence within the NWA. In 1963, when the NWA booked Lou Thesz to defeat Buddy Rogers for the world title, CWC refused to recognize the decision and left the NWA, and it rebranded as Worldwide Wrestling Federation, WWWF, which is now the WWE. They named Buddy Rogers their first champion, but after a heart attack, he lost the title in under a minute to Bruno Sammartino. I don't want you thinking that he pinned him on the hospital bed. It was just weird to exchange the title. He then went on to hold the championship for a record 2,803 days. That's nearly 8 years. And he became a cultural icon in New York, especially at Madison Square Garden, which would become the WWF's main stomping ground. Now, wrestling did decline in popularity again in the late 60s and early 80s, but in 1973 they did sign Andre the Giant, whose massive size, and you probably have seen pictures of Andre the Giant, made him a global sensation and made him wrestling's biggest attraction, and every promoter worldwide wanted him for their show. Now, the 1980s kind of marked the end of the territory system, as the WWF has expanded nationwide under Vince McMahon, who purchased the company from his father in 1982. Breaking with tradition, McMahon began broadcasting WWF programming across the country, including in territories that were controlled by other wrestlers, such as AWA, for example. And he was aggressively signing top wrestlers from these other promotions, including Hulk Hogan in 1983. Hogan quickly became the face of the WWF and won the WWF Championship from the Iron Sheik on January 23rd, 1984, which launched the Hulkamania era. Vince McMahon also attempted a hostile takeover of one of the biggest markets of Southern wrestling by purchasing Georgia Championship Wrestling back in 1984 and taking over its national TV slot on TBS. This move would become to be known in history as Black Saturday. However, WWF's style clashed with the traditional Southern wrestling audience, and after a complete ratings disaster, McMahon sold the time slot to Jim Crockett Promotions, JCP, which later became WWF's biggest competitor. At the same time, JCP launched Starrcade in 1983. This featured Ric Flair defeating Harley Race for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. This helped solidify Flair as a national star. Starrcade became the NWA's biggest event, serving as the what will become WCW equivalent of WrestleMania in the later years. WWF's Rock and Wrestling collection brought mainstream attention to wrestling as well. So a partnership with MTV led to two hit events. There was the Brawl to End It All, which was in 1984, and the War to Settle the Score, which was in 1985. And this featured celebrities like Cyndi Lauper and Mr. T. This ultimate crossover culminated in a show called Wrestlemania. Wrestlemania launched on March 31st, 1985 at Madison Square Garden, with Hogan and Mr. T defeating Roddy Piper in the main event. Now, Wrestlemania became an annual spectacle, turning wrestling into a mainstream phenomenon and making WWF the dominant force in the industry today. We still have Wrestlemania running, and we are currently, at time of recording, leading up to WrestleMania 41. By the late 80s, WWF's dominance and the collapse of smaller promotions left JCP struggling. So in 1988, Ted Turner bought JCP and rebranded it as World Championship Wrestling, also known as WCW. In 1993, WCW formally split from the NWA and appointed Eric Bischoff as Executive VP. His goal was to compete directly with the WWF. So on September 4th, 1995, WCW launched Monday Nitro, airing at the exact same time slot as WWF Raw, their flagship show, and that ignited the Monday Night Wars. WCW's biggest move came in 1996 when Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, formerly Razor Ramon and Diesel in WF, debuted as the Outsiders. At Bash at the Beach in 1996, Hulk Hogan shockingly turned heel, forming the New World Order, which was a rebellious faction that made WCW the #1 wrestling promotion for 83 consecutive weeks, beating WWE Raw in the ratings. Now, while WCW dominated ratings, WWF tried to counter with what they would come to know as the Attitude Era. This was shifting to edgier, more reality-based storytelling. We had people like Stone Cold Steve Austin becoming a rebellious anti-hero, feuding with Vince McMahon, while stars like The Rock, Triple H, and Mick Foley really kind of thrived in WWF's more chaotic and unpredictable product. WCW's downfall began in 1999, when poor booking decisions like ending Goldberg's streak with a cattle prod, over-reliance on aging stars, and general financial mismanagement caused fans to lose interest. The finger poke of doom, David Arquette winning the WCW title, and Vince Russo's disastrous creative decisions only made things worse. By March 26, 2001, WWF officially purchased WCW, ending the Monday Night Wars and solidifying WWF as the last company standing in professional wrestling. So now wrestling had entered a period of transformation, marked by the fall of WCW and ECW. It left WE as the undisputed leader. This allowed them to kind of establish itself as a mainstream force, taking advantage of the shifting culture by capitalizing on the popularity of the stars like The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and later wrestlers like Brock Lesnar, John Cena, all while navigating this whole rebranding to WE after they lost a lawsuit back in 2002. So the Attitude Era evolved into the Ruthless Aggression period. This helped produce new stars and push forward with groundbreaking concepts like the Elimination Chamber and Money in the Bank ladder matches. The mid-2000s saw a mix of veterans like Ric Flair and Goldberg joining the roster, while younger talent like John Cena, Batista, Randy Orton really helped define a new era. At the same time, wrestling's embrace of reality kind of blurred the lines between scripted storylines and real-life tensions. The decade also saw women's wrestling gain more prominence, culminating in the Women's Revolution, where female wrestlers started to main event pay-per-views and break barriers with matches like Hell in a Cell, Money in the Bank, and even the first all-women's pay-per-view titled Evolution. Despite the dominance of WWE, the 2010s did witness a rise in global wrestling, with promotions like New Japan Pro Wrestling and TNA gaining momentum, the former benefiting from stars like Kenny Omega and the Bullet Club. As WWE sought to expand internationally, New Japan Pro Wrestling expanded into the United States, and niche promotions began to thrive online, and this helped pave the way for the birth of All Elite Wrestling in 2019. AEW capitalized on the success of their debut event called All In. This was the first independent promotion to fill a 10,000-seat arena in decades, and this helped mark a new chapter in wrestling, with fresh talent and a real fan-driven, more diverse product. So as wrestling continues to evolve, WWE obviously remains the industry juggernaut, but AEW's rise and the global expansion of wrestling through streaming services have really helped pave the way for a more competitive, diverse landscape, ensuring that wrestling's future will be shaped by both tradition and innovation. So with 8 minutes to spare, there is the complete surface knowledge understanding of pro wrestling, according to me that is. I hope you learned something along the way and you're able to share a few tidbits with friends, strangers, pro wrestling fans alike. Please remember to like, share and subscribe if you enjoyed even just 10% of this episode, and I will be back next week with more information to shove in that noggin of yours, because next week's episode, we're going to gain a surface knowledge understanding of video games. Until next time, folks.
You've been listening to the Surface Knowledge Podcast, part of the GT5 Network. Be sure to subscribe and rate on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. We'll see you back here soon for another episode. Until next time, stay curious.